Welcome to the JOMA, Jewish Orthodox Women's Medical Association podcast. I'm your host, Elisa Minkin. I'm a general pediatrician and proud member of JOMA, and I'm honored and excited to be here today with Lianne Forman. Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Good. Thank you for being here and doing this with me.
Thank you.
Lianne is a corporate and employment lawyer by training. She's the executive director of a new organization called Communities Confronting Substance Abuse, or CCSA. The organization she and her husband, Etiel, I pronounce it? Etiel, founded in 2018. Through their own family struggles, they founded CCSA to create greater community awareness and education about substance misuse and addiction in the Jewish community. CCSA's mission is to eliminate stigma around addiction in the Jewish communities through awareness events and facilitating evidence-based educational programming in schools for students and parents about substance use. The website, I'm going to spell it out, www.jewishccsa.org, is where you can find more information. And it is an amazing, comprehensive website. I'm still working my way through it.
Thank you.
You have a phenomenal board. I'm really, really impressed. Everybody should go check out the board of experts from all different fields of addiction medicine. Rabbi Tzvi Gluck is there, just the whole range. It's super impressive.
Thank you.
So how did you get started in this?
Not by choice, kind of by life experience and adversity. When we have 5 children, Ilana is our second oldest. She is the one who is now in recovery from substance addiction. Her journey and our journey as a family really began just before high school. She was coming out of 8th grade, going into 9th grade. She was very nervous about high school, which is a very normal feeling for an 8th grader, going through that change of friends and schools and what to expect. And she felt like maybe she wasn't going to fit in and she wasn't going to make friends. And she had mentioned to us later in life, when she talks about that night, that really what she was feeling was just out of place. Like she was just taking up too much space in this world. And, everything she had ever seen about alcohol on movies or TV was somebody takes a drink and it calms them down. And she kind of just went to that as her go-to coping mechanism and took alcohol. We don't have all that much in our house. We had a bottle of wine for Kiddush. We had, a bottle of scotch my husband got from work. She took whatever she could find and she mixed it together, not understanding alcohol content and percentages, and got very sick. She ended up, getting very, very sick. We happened to have been out. It was the end of the summer. We took advantage of a nice quiet night, and came home to find her drunk. Mm-hmm. We had never seen her drunk before. We had never seen her, try alcohol before. We immediately, put her to bed, spoke to her the next morning when she was a little bit more coherent. And she explained to us what happened, that she got very nervous and that, she drank. We immediately put her into therapy because we recognized right away that is a very normal feeling, but that is not a healthy coping skill. Right. And she really needed to talk through her anxiety and her fears, but work through it in a healthy way and find ways to cope with that productively. High school went on. She was straight A student. She got into an honors program in college. Always top of her class. She was captain of her soccer team. She founded the chess team at her school, really kind of the poster child of her high school. Unbeknownst to us, she was what, kids would call it experimenting. She was drinking alcohol on Shabbos with friends. She was trying marijuana. Wasn't a regular thing, but it was enough that it was kind of throughout high school. She was doing this experimentation. What she didn't realize and what we didn't realize until much later was that those substances were already hijacking her brain and laying the groundwork for a full-blown addiction, which is what she faced when she got to college. As she put it, she would go visit friends on Shabbos and there'd be an older sibling there and they would have alcohol or they would have marijuana and they would offer it to their sibling and to her. And that's really where she had access to it. And I'm talking about families, people judge and they, bad kids use drugs or bad families have kids who use drugs. It's not a matter of bad or good. Drugs don't make you a bad person because you use them. Drugs are dangerous, but using the word good, these were good families that she was going over to. These were, wholesome, solid families, which I would have had no thought in my mind, the older siblings are using substances. That's just, what we were feeling at the time. And I'm just giving you the perspective, historically. Come to college, she went off to harder substances, much more availability. She started out with Adderall, used that to stay up nights to do work and write papers. And then, after being up on stimulants and abusing them, she needed downers to come down from that just to sleep. And it was just a vicious cycle. And there wasn't anything she wouldn't try. She tried cocaine. She tried other, she didn't try heroin, thank God. But she did try other substances in college. And again, it was laying that path to this full-blown addiction. Did okay first year of college. We had no idea this was going on. We were seeing her, but not, regularly. And if she was home, she wasn't coming home high or drunk. In her second year of college, that's when it really started to hit. And right now, what we do is we go into schools and we talk to students, and she and other people in recovery will tell their story using our evidence-based program that we bring into schools. So I'm kind of going to switch over to her voice now, because, this is something we learned as I listened to these presentations, I learned more and more about her experience and her journey. What she says is that her aha moment really came somewhere during her sophomore year of college, where she was hanging out with this guy, doing drugs, doing whatever, drinking. And she woke up one Sunday morning and saw a text on her phone saying, Dan died last night of an overdose. And that was her good friend. And it scared her. She, felt terrible for the family. And this, kid was 20, 21 at most. But what scared her more is that they were doing the exact same things. And she started to think, this could be me. This was towards the end of her first semester, actually her junior year. She kind of finished her sophomore year. I don't know how she did that, but she finished it. Towards the end of her first semester, junior year, things were really falling apart. She wasn't going to classes anymore. As she described it, she needed a substance in her body first thing in the morning, to face the world, to just get out of bed, just to feel normal. It wasn't about getting high. It wasn't about feeling good. It wasn't about, any of the emotional experience. She was physically and chemically dependent at that point. And she reached out to us. As we recall, it was at a birthday dinner in person in the city. As she recalls it, she sent us a text, but either way, she, put up a white flag and, said, come help me. We met with her and said, you need to get into treatment and we need to find somebody. And she recanted. She said, I can do this. I can handle this on my own. That following month, her lease was almost up on her apartment. And at that point, we made the very painful and heartbreaking decision not to give her any more money. We knew that the money we were giving her for rent was going towards drugs. We knew she was no longer going to classes and did not want to pay tuition anymore. So we told her, we're not paying for next semester's tuition. We're not paying for your apartment. And, it's a terrifying fork in the road. Your kid really could go either way. Part of us was afraid she was going to end up homeless and on the streets and dead. But we had hoped, and thank God it was, fulfilled. We hoped that she would get the help that she needed. She went down to rehab in Florida. It was not a straight path at all. And she was in and out a couple of times. One time she actually was convinced by another patient to leave against medical advice. They went out on the streets for 3 days. We had no idea where she was. She didn't have a phone. We didn't know if the next call was going to be from the coroner or the police. We had no idea what was going on at that point. Thank God we got a call from an insurance company. She was checking out another treatment facility. So we knew she was going back into treatment at least, but there were about 36, 72 hours there that, were just hell. She went back into treatment with this girl. And again, this girl tried to convince her to leave. I don't know what made Ilana say, no, I need to stay. Something clicked. And about 6 months later, this girl had gone home to Ohio to be with her family and decided she needed to check herself back into treatment again and came back to Florida. And the night before she was going into treatment, she wanted to have one more hurrah, and she overdosed and died. And I actually wrote an article after that happened, which was published around here in a local paper, There But for the Grace of God Go I. It really was, their paths were together for so much of that recovery journey. And Ilana chose, thank God, to go one way. And this girl, unfortunately, went the other way. And as Ilana puts it, she's been to more funerals than weddings, and she's, just turned 26. So in her short life, she's, lost a lot of people, some very, very close to her, some just people she's been at, meetings with or in rehab with. But it was a long and painful journey. She is now 3.5 years in recovery.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, she's doing well. She actually finished college last semester, and as she put it, the best 8 years of her life. And she is in UPenn now, getting a master's in liberal studies.
That is so amazing.
Yeah, so it's a journey, but at least right now, for now, things are good.
That is such an amazing story. I want to go back because I'm still stuck back after that first night that she drank to the point of getting sick, and you put her in therapy. Why did she choose to continue to abuse substances after that? You might think she would have been scared straight. That was what they used to do, scared straight. Remember that?
Right. A couple of reasons. Number one, even though it had a very negative effect on her physically, throwing up, really incoherent, really, really sick. She said just before she kind of passed out from drinking that much alcohol and that kind of strength of alcohol, she looked in the mirror. She said she was home by herself. She looked in the mirror and she said, aha, this is it. This is what's going to make me feel better. And before you even have that physical dependency, you have an emotional dependency. There's something called a repeat effect. It is, and as a doctor, you probably know this, but when you introduce something to the brain that triggers dopamine, so the brain automatically categorizes it and says, that's important. That's for survival. That's something that's really critical to me. That makes me happy. That makes me feel good. And you're that much more likely to go back to it the next time around. Every single person that I've talked to in recovery says they had horrible first experiences with a variety of substances. I have one young man who is several years in recovery and said the first time he tried opioids, he said he was horribly, horribly sick, but he went back to it again. Why did they go back? That's why I'm saying it's not a choice. It's not a moral failing or character flaw. There is something that is genetically wired in certain people that they are just much more susceptible to this process, and they don't realize it. And again, Ilana was not necessarily abusing substances in high school. She was doing what all the kids call experimenting. But that just, using alcohol occasionally, using marijuana occasionally, that led her down this path. And that's what she tells, all the students that she speaks to, both in middle school and high school. She tells them her story, and she's very honest and very real with them. In fact, every single one of my presenters, and I have 5 or 6, every single one started using substances before high school.
Wow. And I do believe that studies show that the earlier you start, the greater the likelihood of later substance abuse, as opposed to you're putting it use where it's experimentation. It's interesting that you say that aha moment, because I've heard it said many times that the person will say, I felt uncomfortable in my own skin. And then when I took it, I felt I'm where I'm supposed to be. This is how I should feel.
Right.
So I think that's important for people to understand.
Right. It fills a void. What we do talk about in these presentations with students is how can you, find your natural high? How can you create that feeling without using substances? And you said something, about, using earlier and earlier. What we talk about is delaying onset of first use. That's the biggest protective factor right there against addiction. The longer you wait, and we talk to kids about the development of the brain doesn't start, it doesn't fully mature until the age of 25. If you can wait until then, that's ideal. As my daughter always puts to the kids, I'm not telling you, on your 25th birthday, you'll run out and get drunk or get high, but, the longer you can push off using or continuing to use substances, the better off you are, because all the studies are showing the earlier and earlier you start using any of these substances, the greater your chances are for addiction.
Right. Now, I first we talked about this a little bit before, but just make it crystal clear that this could happen to anyone.
Yes.
It happened to your family, and your, super successful family. This wasn't a family where there was dysfunction going on. And Alana herself did not have any specific diagnoses, correct?
No. She had anxiety and depression. Okay. She did have, she definitely had some mental health issues. I don't think addiction really is a standalone disease. I think there's always a comorbidity of some sort. Eating disorders, you name it. There could be another coexisting mental health condition. No, it really is something, and this is, really important to understand. We had to reframe what we thought of addiction. I mean, to me, an addict was always some derelict bum under a bridge with a needle hanging in their arm. Like, it could not be this nice little Jewish girl who, went to yeshiva high school and who is brilliant, but was brilliant in high school and excelling at everything, and, had friends and was doing really well socially and emotionally. And yet, this was her path. This was her journey. And it affected everybody in the family. It affected her relationships with us. It affected her relationship with her siblings. It's been a long way back. We are better off than we ever were, even before she started using substances. But it took a lot of work.
Right. In addition to understanding that it can happen to anyone, and I feel like I have to keep saying this, but it's so common, including in the frum world. I mean, I think there was this myth that a Jew couldn't be an alcoholic once upon a time.
Right.
And so how common is this?
It is incredibly common. We get calls from everywhere, from every walk of life. I get calls from Lakewood, Passaic, Brooklyn. I had a Sotmere woman call me once and say she was 3 days into recovery from alcohol and pain pills. Intermarried couples, it doesn't matter. I mean, it's every spectrum on the entire continuum of Judaism. When we told our story, so this goes back to 2018, we had an awareness event. We were contacted by the local Jewish papers and the local secular paper, and all three of them ran this as their front page story. Orthodox family breaks silence over addiction. It was like headline news. But what it did was it opened the door for, I cannot tell you how many people to approach me everywhere I went. I went to my daughter's soccer game. Someone came to talk to me. I went to Amazing Savings. Someone came to a parking lot, a grocery store, just out on a walk with my husband. And people were coming over and over. Some really tragic stories. I had one person tell me she lost her brother several years ago to an overdose. I had a man tell me his wife was addicted to painkillers after having a surgery, and really, really struggling. Some successful stories, but the night of the event, which was a crazy, crazy night, we set up for 400 people in this big auditorium. We thought we were going to get 50 or 100 people to come. Like, we didn't think it was going to be such a big thing. 700 people came that night. There were another 300 online. It was streaming online. We were told that there were traffic jams in Teaneck, like where there were never ever traffic jams, like just trying to get to, we were at it at a local high school. And we knew we had struck a nerve. And the night started out with a woman coming up, one woman that I knew peripherally and one woman I didn't know at all. And the woman who I didn't know was crying hysterically and couldn't get a word out. And this woman said she wanted to come and meet you. And finally she stopped crying and she said, my son overdosed 4 years ago and died. And I just want to thank you for telling your story. It ended the night with a person who I've known for over a decade and known pretty well. And he came up to me and he said, I had no idea about Ilana. I had no idea. And I said, well, why would you have an idea? Nobody talks about this. And he said, I just want you to know my son is an addict also. He's been in and out of rehab, in and out of treatment for years and years and years, really a lifelong struggle for this young man. And I just looked at him and I said, how can we have known each other for 10 years and never known that about each other? And it really, the main reason we had that event was really because we had no one to talk to. Right. And, it wasn't so long ago that cancer was the C word and you couldn't talk about that. Yeah. And mental health issues are still stigmatized, but they're better. There's at least more discussion. I mean, talk about Ilana's anxiety, depression. I knew other parents who had kids who were going through anxiety and depression, and we could talk about it, even to just get resources. What psychiatrist did you use? Is there a therapist? What medications are you on? I mean, anything, like just in terms of dialogue and sharing and openness. It was there to an extent. When it came to addiction, there was nothing. It was silent. And I knew statistically that could not be true. I knew that there had to be other people. And that's just been borne out the last 3 years since we kind of came out and made our pronouncement that we're suffering from this in our family. And people are finding us. We have a support group now for loved ones of those who are struggling with substance misuse and addiction. And we have people from all over the country who are on Zoom with us.
Oh, it's an online support group. Is that?
We moved it to online because of COVID. And now because we have so many people from varying degrees and distances, we are probably going to keep it online. We might end up doing some kind of hybrid, but we started out, just in person. We're here in Teaneck, so we started in person. We had people from Passaic, we had people from Muncie, and people locally. And then when we moved it online, we have people from Baltimore, Brooklyn, Detroit, Atlanta, Massachusetts, Connecticut.
People can find out on your website for the CCSA?
Yeah, you can find it. It's under resources. There's one tab that says support group. Oh, wow. And if somebody just emails me, I can tell them more. But mostly it's parents and some spouses. We have some spouses there for their husbands or wives. Parents of kids anywhere from 16 to 40. And I mean, I call a kid 40, but it's still their kid. And then we have siblings. We've had other relationships also. We had a child for a parent. We've had an aunt for a niece, but it's rampant. And people need to realize, and again, one of the reasons why it's so difficult to speak about it is because everybody thinks it's so shameful. Mm-hmm. And, the sufferer feels ashamed, the family feels ashamed, and they keep it this big secret and they can't talk about it and they can't tell anyone. And I can't tell you how many people call me with that opening line. I can't talk about this with anyone. I just got 3 calls from Israel this week. Same story, started out saying, I don't know anybody and I can't talk to anybody. And I'm, one after the other, I was kind of like, well, I can introduce you to each other. Maybe you can talk to each other. But the more dialogue, the more we encourage people to come forward and get the help they need, and the better the outcomes. And, people should not feel embarrassed about this. It's a disease like any other disease, and it needs proper medical attention and treatment. And families should not feel like it's a shameful secret they need to bury or hide.
Right, absolutely not. And it's great that they don't have to feel alone. But back to not feeling embarrassed or ashamed, what are some things that people said to you that were helpful and some things that were not helpful? Because for people listening, they may be struggling with this with their family, or they may know someone. And I think it can be helpful to know ways to help and ways to not be so helpful.
So the only unhelpful thing, and it wasn't anything anybody said to us in person, but when we did the awareness event in April 2018, it was on some different websites. And in one particular community, there was comments about the story. And basically someone said, it must be the parents, must be the parenting, that, it's their fault. They must have parented badly. I don't take blame for my kids' problems and faults. I don't take credit for their successes either.
Right. It has to go both ways.
I have kids and thank God Elon is a huge success too, but my kids are wonderful, wonderful kids, very successful, very good kids. Elon is, again, not a bad kid because she struggled with a disease that affected her the way it did. I'm not embarrassed by it. But I just kind of looked at that and, it's ignorance. It's ignorance. And that is really the worst enemy of this is somebody who's ignorant. I'm not saying that everybody needs to go up and shout from the rooftops. I mean, when I told my story, I just kept on telling myself I was nervous. I was terrified. And I just kept on telling myself, go big or go home, go big or go home. And that was my mantra the whole week before this event. I actually did not get up and speak. My husband told our story, not a peep in the room. I didn't even know how many people were behind me. I had no idea there were 700 people behind me.
And 300 online.
And I definitely didn't know about that. Someone said to me, turn around and look behind you. And I said, I'm not looking behind me. I'm in the front row. How embarrassing is that to turn around and look over my shoulder? So I really had no idea what was going on. And it was silent. It was silent. And it was a long event. It was not, I don't know how people sat so quietly. But, when we told our story, I told people this is not ripping off a Band-Aid. This is ripping off a body cast. Right. I am revealing every fiber of my being by doing this. And that's not for everybody. That is certainly not for everybody. I've been contacted by a lot of people who want to come to the support group and then say, I can't come. I don't want to really tell my story to other people, even though there's so much support. And these are such warm and nice people that are also going through it and totally get it. They're in your shoes and they understand you and they speak the same language. But some people just can't bring themselves to talk about it, openly, even in that kind of protected, very, very secretive group. I mean, I don't give out the link to the Zoom meeting. I give out a different link every week. It only goes to a vetted list of people who I ask, who are you here for? And, I make sure it's not somebody who is coming on. Not that anybody's ever tried to come on for any other reason, but I'm very careful about who comes on, and we always talk about confidentiality. We don't talk about each other, not even without names or attribution, because you could say, I don't care about me, but I know this woman and she and her husband are lawyers and they live in Teaneck and they have 5 kids, and already, then you've narrowed it down to, maybe 20 families in Teaneck, but at some point somebody can say something that triggers, oh, I know that family. And we don't want to do that to the people. If they're not ready to talk about it publicly, they shouldn't have to, but at least I want them to be able to share with other people who get it.
Right. I mean, the truth is, with any issue, not everybody, thrives with a support group setting. Some people need to go for individual help and have it be completely private. Some people don't want to talk about it. They need to do things in other ways.
Right.
But we haven't mentioned the stigma word yet. I think we should talk about it, because that's what this talk is called. It's time to talk.
Again, it is certainly something that is stigmatized, unfortunately. And again, it's, partially because out of ignorance and out of just not understanding that this is a disease. People think of it as a lifestyle choice or a moral failing of some sort. And it's really changing that language. We do that from all angles. We do it from our support group angle. We do it, anytime I speak on a podcast like this, or I do parenting workshops, or I present in any kind of awareness or education event. We're talking about eliminating stigma, and I bring in people and panelists, to do events for us, who also are going to, work to increase dialogue and awareness and education. And in the schools, even talking to the students, we're telling them, this is a disease. And so if you know somebody who's struggling or you're struggling, it's not telling on them. It's not ratting them out. It's actually getting them help. And we're trying to reframe it. They're not getting somebody in trouble. They're helping somebody. And thankfully, most of the schools that we work with do not have punitive policies. They actually are policies that are, designed to help somebody get the help they need if they are having an issue.
Mm-hmm. So what is your organization? What does it actually do? Because I know, there are other organizations. There's Amudim, for example, there's MASC, right. There are many. How does CCSA differ?
So we are different. We're, Amudim is case management. There's also relief. They do case management where if you have an issue, you call up, and they're focused on other issues as well, sexual abuse and other, mental health issues and other issues that, affect the Jewish community. We are not clinicians. We have clinicians who work with us and consult with us, but we are not here to refer you to treatment or find you a psychologist or a psychiatrist. That's not what we do. When we had that awareness event, we handed out feedback cards. We had the foresight to know that this was not going to be a one and done. And the feedback we got was threefold. One was, we want a support group for Jewish people, for family members who have somebody who's struggling. And we formed that right away in May 2018. And unfortunately, I don't know which, it's been going strong since then. It's professionally facilitated. We have professional clinicians who volunteer their time and facilitate the group. So we always have somebody on who can answer questions or guide the discussion or, make observations that from a professional point of view, but it's peer-to-peer support. It's not a 12-step group or anything like that. It's peer-to-peer support. So a little less formal. The second was more education and awareness events. And we've done several of those. We recently did one where we actually offered continuing education credits because that's something that was asked of us a while back. We've done symposium and events where people have said, oh, can I get credits? So that's something we're going to probably do more of. But, I know you said you spoke about alcohol before Purim. Before this Purim, this past Purim, we had an event online, Alcoholism and Judaism. Purim, Simchat Torah, Shalom Zachar, all the alcohol that's in our rituals, Kiddush, Shabbat. And we had two people on who struggle with alcoholism, one woman, one man, a clinician, and a rabbi. And sounds like a joke, but
Well,
rabbi, clinician,
right.
they all walked into a bar. But they spoke about, the ones in recovery spoke about their own struggles with orthodoxy and alcohol. And we, just to increase awareness, sensitivity, you're at a Shalom Zachar, you offer somebody l'chaim, they say, no, don't offer a second time. Right. You have no idea if they're struggling or not. So just to increase sensitivity. So a lot of those community awareness events that happen to have 250 people, I think, online from across the country, from Israel, from England. So we keep on doing those periodically. And then this school program that we have we've been presented in over 25 schools this year.
Wow.
Both middle and high schools. We've presented to probably over 3,000 students and over 1,000 parents affiliated with those schools. So the program itself is, why it's unique is there are people who come in and tell their story. I did drugs, I was in addiction, I'm in recovery, here's what happened to me. And then there are social emotional wellness curriculum that are taught in schools, and they have a substance use unit, and they talk about drugs and alcohol and what they do to the brain and the body. We combine the two. We have a vetted evidence-based program. It's audiovisual, it's goes into brain development. It goes into, for 8th graders, we talk about alcohol, nicotine, marijuana, and prescription medications, and talk about, how they affect the brain and body, kind of a science lesson, but the person giving it is the person in recovery, like my daughter. Mm-hmm. So they're infusing their personal journey throughout the presentation and bringing it back again and again. So when they talk about the cycle of addiction, they talk about introducing a substance, how it builds up tolerance, that results in increasing that substance or moving on to a harder substance and ultimately replacing the natural production of dopamine and, being in full-blown addiction. And then my daughter or my other presenters will say, that's what happened when and they go back to their story. It has had tremendous, tremendous feedback from many, many schools. Most importantly, the students find it very powerful and very compelling. And the feedback we hear after the fact is that kids come up and talk about it, ask questions. I've had at least 2 situations that, because of the presentations, one was an 8th grader who was over a friend's house, and the friend went to the liquor cabinet and took out tequila and started drinking tequila. And the boy called his father and he said, and the father ended up calling me and telling me this story. I remember the presenter came in and said, I'm not telling on somebody, I'm helping them. Wow. And I want you to know this is what my friend is doing right now. And the father said, thank you for letting me know. And I'm going to call the other boy's father right now. And we're going to handle this. One of the reasons why Ilana didn't come forward in high school and didn't say anything is because she was afraid of being labeled a bad kid. Right. She was afraid that people were going to say, don't hang around with her anymore. Don't be with her. So again, we're trying to reframe it as much as we can. I had another school guidance counselor called me, also 8th grade. 2 girls came up after the presentation, said they were worried about their friend. She's drinking, she's hanging out with older boys. I don't know, we don't know what else she's doing. We're very worried about her. And she kind of called me for my input on it. And I said, you got to follow through with exactly what we said, which is you're not going to be punitive about it.
Right.
Right. We just told these kids they can come forward to their safety net, to a trusted adult, a guidance counselor, a teacher, a rabbi, anybody, medical professional, give them the whole list of people that they could come to. I said, they came to you, they chose you. So now, you have to take this to the next level. And we talk about getting this to an adult who can then hopefully get it to the next right person, and find this person help.
So how does this program work? This is just for the kids, that you come in and talk directly to the kids?
So initially we started out just in Bergen County. We have a very close relationship with the Bergen County Prosecutor's Office and the Bergen County Prevention Coalition. We kind of designed this 3-part program. We brought them into schools. Mm-hmm. Very soon after that, we realized there were other schools outside Bergen County that wanted to do this. Mm-hmm. So we worked on, over last summer, this audiovisual program. It's about 45 minutes of content. And, again, we have a lot of clinicians, educators, guidance counselors, prevention experts who work with us. They all watch this program over and over. We have it from vetted resources. We really put a lot of time and effort into it. We beta tested it. And then the idea was put forth, which was a fantastic idea. Instead of me giving it, or, and I can tell my story. I'm telling my story right now as a parent. but how much more powerful for the first person, you know, in first person to tell, this is what happened to me and this is what I did. And, you know, I mean, I have one presenter who comes from a very, very frum community. And again, like this is it can happen to anyone. So don't judge a book by its cover, but, you know, very yeshivish community where, you know, you think these things don't happen. She said when she was 11 years old, her family would go into wash netilat yadayim after making kiddush, and she would wait by the dining room table until everybody was in the kitchen and down as much wine as she could.
Hi.
And then they would come back, you know, for challah. And that's how her journey started. And thankfully, she's really many, many years in solid recovery. But again, that's just certain people are wired that way. We don't know why. And there's some science on it, but you can't predict.
Right. I want to get back to that point, but I just still want to understand this is a program that you come in, your presenters come into the school.
Correct.
They talk directly to the kids who are what, 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th grade?
7th, 8th, anywhere from 7th to 12th grade, and any combination, meaning sometimes we do 7th and 8th graders together. Sometimes we do 10th and 11th grade. Over this summer, we're actually working on differentiated programming that's going to be, you know, targeted, let's say, to 12th graders who are going off to Israel or to college, targeting really age-specific issues. You know, creating more choices for schools if they want to do workshops, if they, you know, if they've done our program with one grade, then maybe the next year we come back and follow up on it with something different that reinforces what they learned the year before.
Right. So this program is a one-time program. Is a multiple-time program? How long is it?
Well, so it can be a multiple-time program in the sense that we can come back and do the, you know, the workshop as like an adjunct. And for Bergen County specifically, we still bring in the prosecutor's office. They still have their own standalone presentation on opioids and substances. It's something that they have in all the public schools in Bergen County. They actually adapted it and changed it to make it culturally sensitive. They sat down with us for hours and hours and edited their program just to make it appropriate for yeshivas, because they have a community outreach. They've never been able to get into the Orthodox community in any meaningful way. And we were kind of their foot in the door.
Okay. You partnered with them.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I'm not into reinventing the wheel, and I'm not into duplicating what other people are doing. You know, the prosecutor's office is amazing. They have some amazing people who really are interested in our community, the Jewish community, because we make up a big part of Bergen County. And, you know, this was their first time that their outreach team could actually connect.
So my next question is, do you have a program for parents?
So we do a program for parents. We have, my husband and I present, we kind of do what I did today. We tell our story. We talk about stigma. We talk about modeling for kids, you know, not to bring out the $200 bottle of scotch and go, ooh, ah, because the kids are saying, wow, that's something special, you know, glorifying it. We do believe you can have a healthy relationship with substances, you know, over the age of 25. Even though 21 is the legal age, we still say 25 because that's the science. And, you know, especially with the legalization of marijuana, we're running into a lot of issues, questions from kids, you know, why it's being legalized. And it's a really tough topic. We're starting to hear about, you know, instead of a kiddush club where you know, take shots of scotch, we're hearing about people going and having edibles at their kiddush club. So it's going to be a bigger issue the more it becomes commonplace in our community. And I already know from, you know, people calling me that it's an issue for some people, really taking them down a path that's very dangerous and very unfortunate.
So is the parent program automatically a component of the children's program, or are they separate?
We offer it to the schools, and we offer it because we want to encourage dialogue between the parents and the children. We also have a clinician on who talks about communication skills, how to approach the topic with your kids, you know, giving them pointers and tips and strategies to you know, bring up this difficult subject. The main gist of it is to, number one, tell the parents what we are telling or what we told your kids and what they heard from us. And number two, to encourage them to talk to their kids about this, and not just once, not just a please don't do drugs, please don't drink, but, you know, an ongoing organic conversations, teachable moments, ways to kind of strategize with them how to keep on bringing this up in an age appropriate way. We get a lot of, I mean, one thing that we have developed with the parent program is the more questions I hear from kids, the more I repeat them in the parent program, because I'm telling them what is on your kids' minds, what they know, what they see, what they're asking. I cannot tell you how many kids, and mostly middle school, ask, what should I do if I'm worried about somebody? What happens if it's an adult I'm worried about? Well, why is that kid asking that question? You know, if there's got to be somebody in their life that's either, you know, actively using substances in a way that concerns them. And it could be an adult, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a parent, but it could be somebody they know, you know, and they're struggling and they don't know how to help them, and they want to help them. And why should an 8th grader have that burden on their shoulders? They're not there to be a therapist or an addiction counselor. So we really kind of open up the dialogue, even with the kids, when the kids ask questions, especially questions that, you know, we feel maybe it's not so appropriate for us to answer. We're honest. We're not going to beat around the bush, but if it's something that we feel maybe is, you know, better dealt with in the home or with a guidance counselor, we will say, that's a great question. You know what? We gave your parents a presentation last night, or we're speaking to them tonight. Why don't you go home and tell them that this is what you're learning, and ask them about this question. See if you can do research together. See if you can figure it out together. Trying to bridge that gap between the parents and the children to make sure that this is something that's an active dialogue in their home.
Right. That's why I was asking if you always have the parent program associated with the kid program.
It's not compulsory. We recommend it. It's not compulsory, and not every school did it this year. You know, the 25 or so schools that had us in to meet with the students, not every single one had the parent program. And the parent program also is not necessarily mandatory. Some schools had much better attendance than others. You know, we reach as many people as we can reach. And, you know, there are schools that make it mandatory, but many of them do not. So, and this year, frankly, people are Zoomed out. So, you know, to go to another meeting, you know.
Right. Except you don't have to leave your home.
I know, that's the beauty of it. And I actually think we're continuing this parent thing on Zoom next year. I don't think we're going to move it off of Zoom unless the school wants us to. If they want us to come in person because they think it'll be more effective, they can get people in, you know, in the evening. But I think it's actually better to have it on Zoom for parents, not for kids.
Yeah, there should always be a Zoom option for parents. Enough to do. But the reason I keep saying this over and over and over is because as a parent, we need to be empowered. You know, it's so scary to be raising kids nowadays. I mean, I don't have to tell you, there's not just drugs. There are so many other things. You know, I don't want to list them all, but you feel disempowered. And I have to tell you, my kids' schools had mandatory substance abuse nights. And because it was just a single night, and because I feel like they were older already, I felt like here we are, we're already, you know, feeling overwhelmed. And then you have this one night event where you're like, this is your brain on drugs. Remember that? They would show the egg.
Right.
Any questions? No, I don't have any questions. No, but I loved in your website, I found a whole section on different scenarios. And you talked about teachable moments, and everybody, we're not going to have time to go through them. I don't want to be tedious here, but everybody go to the website right now, jewishcca.org, and look up these. It was drug prevention tips for every age, because even 8th grade or 7th grade is really too late in some ways. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, it's never too little, you know, too late, but these conversations should start from the very beginning. So
one question we get very often is, what's your biggest regret? Our biggest regret is that we had one conversation with our kids before they started high school. And that was, if you're at a party, if you know, something happens, you're not comfortable with it, you don't want to get in a car with somebody, or you lied to us. You said you're sleeping over Miriam's house, but really you're at Devorah's house and they're doing, you know, they're having alcohol or whatever, and you're afraid of getting in trouble and it's 2 a.m, just call us. We want you home alive. We want you home safe. We'll talk about it in the morning. And, you know, we had a deal. And we tell parents, make a deal, have a text, you know, a code word, so kids can get out of these uncomfortable situations, because kids make decisions on impulse. Act out scenarios beforehand, give them the tools to kind of have that recall. Oh, I know when I spoke about this before with my mom or with my dad, you know, this is what my go-to was in terms of a choice, a behavior, an option that can get them and extract them out of that situation. You know, it is very difficult parenting. You know, we get a lot of questions. Well, why should I bring this up? I'm going to tell my kids something they don't know. I'm going to open up a Pandora's box, especially in the younger grades. And we're like, first of all, your kids know a lot more than you think.
Right, always.
Second of all, even if they're just doing current events, you know, the opioid epidemic, overdoses, you know, COVID's effect on substance use, the legalization of marijuana, it's in the news. So even if they're just, you know, doing current events in school, they might come across that information. I think what really surprised me is the statistic that kids on average are misusing drugs by the time they're 12 or 13, which means they're started using even before.
Right.
And that's the national average. And we are not immune from this. This is not something that, you know, we should be any different on that scale than the secular world. So it's scary to know. And, you know, and you talk about, you know, your kids going into these programs. My daughter had a program too. And she said she thinks about that program and what she would have wanted to hear that could have been helpful to her. And that's why this program is so powerful. So I have another presenter, a male presenter, who had somebody come into a school and say, drugs are bad, they're terrible. And he lit up a joint at the age of 14 and got high and said, he lied to me. Drugs are wonderful. Drugs are amazing. They make me feel great. And like you said, he was somebody who did not feel comfortable in his own skin. This is the first time he felt okay with himself. And once you get into that, you know, A, you've lost the kids' trust, and B, you're not being honest with them. We're not into scare tactics. We're not into the Nancy Reagan, you know, egg in the frying pan, just say no, this is your brain on drugs. We are honest brokers of scientific information. We want to empower the kids to make healthy choices. And that's really the main gist of you know, what we do. And that's why it's so powerful for the kids, because they really sense that this is somebody who's being real with them and honest with them. And I hope it's something that sticks with them for a very long time.
Right. What are some of the things your daughter said that, besides what you said already, should we ask you the same question? When you said that, I was curious that she would want differently than what she had. Because I know as a parent, I just felt like it's a long day, you're coming, you have to go there in person, there's no Zoom option, and then you're terrified. You're just terrified. I didn't find that helpful for that reason.
Yeah, I mean,
I feel like I had tools, preventative tools.
Yeah, for her, you know, from the kids' perspective, for her, she said somebody gets up, you know, got up in front of my school, and I was sitting where you're sitting, and they talked about, you know, being in recovery, and I thought, okay, good for her. She's in recovery. That's great, but that's not me. That could never happen to me. That doesn't happen to young people. It doesn't happen to Jewish people. It doesn't happen, you know, in our community. And she, you know, we hammer home, it can happen to anyone. And you don't know who, I mean, I don't want to say it's like Russian roulette, but you don't know who that someone is. So, you know, not every person who tries alcohol or marijuana is going to become an addict, but every addict will tell you that's where they started.
Right.
So, you know, who is going to take that drink and have that addictive personality and that genetic makeup that biologically alters their brain chemistry and takes them down that path? It's not overnight. Nobody wakes up and says in the morning, hey, I want to be an addict. You know, it looks like that's fun. You know, is something that hijacks the brain and takes time, and it's a process. And she said she wished she had the information. She might have recognized some of the things that were happening while they were happening. She also wishes that somebody told on her, you know, quote unquote, told on her sooner, would have saved her years of misery and emptiness and unhappiness. So that's a lot of the message that we deliver, which is really powerful.
Right. And talking about it, not just trying to scare you away from these things and this will never happen to you and we're done.
Right.
So I think that's what makes it different. You know, you mentioned the addictive personality, and I keep wanting to not get caught in the trap of, well, we'll just say who this happens to so that we'll know it doesn't happen to us. But can you talk just a little bit about that? I mean, I guess you really wouldn't know that you have that quote unquote addictive personality until you actually got involved with drugs. I mean, I think we just should assume that it could happen to anyone.
It can happen to anyone. Again, there's some, you know, there's some science to it, meaning there are some indicators. If you have addiction in your family, which we do not, if you have addiction in your family, you might be more genetically predisposed. You know, we talk about not being able to limit availability, meaning you don't know when or where you might be offered something. And it could be something like I said before, you know, having surgery and having to go on pain medications afterwards, which are highly addictive. Right. You know, that could happen to an adult. That doesn't have to, and it does happen to adults. Right. I know plenty of adults who, you know, have gotten addicted to pain medication, and then because they couldn't get that anymore, moved on to alcohol, heroin, I mean, you name it. Right. Moved on to some other substance. The story I like to tell, we had one prevention expert who we work with pretty extensively down in Hunterdon County in New Jersey. And she talks about her 3 kids getting their wisdom teeth out different times or different ages. And she said, and this is her field. She is a prevention expert. First one gets his wisdom teeth out, you know, gets whatever Percocet, whatever he got after getting that done, takes one pill and says, I hate the way this makes me feel, I'm done. Second kid has her wisdom teeth out, takes it according to the instructions, whatever, how many days, however many pills per day, no problem, gets off it just fine. Third kid has his wisdom teeth out and is looking at his mommy, when's the next one? When's the next one? And she said these are three biologically from the same parents, raised in the same house, nature, nurture, and yet one of them had that predisposition. So, can you always identify it? No. But again, delaying the onset of first use, pushing off, when you're going to introduce a substance into your body, that's really one of the biggest protective factors that can be employed.
Mm-hmm. And talking about it, and
talking about it
ways. Go back to that website, everybody. There's a whole section on it for the parents of very young children. Like you say, like, this is medicine in my medicine cabinet. This is not your medicine. It has my name on it. It's just for me. Talking about it from
lock it up.
Right. But even if it's not a controlled substance, even if it's a vitamin and you're giving your child a vitamin, this is your vitamin. This is written for you. It's all there. It's really, really excellent. And I thought that was very, very empowering for parents, and not just to, have them feel like they have to be super vigilant on their kids and telling them what to do and trying to control them. Trying to control teenagers is really an exercise in failure.
All the research out there says we parents still have an effect on our kids, even though we don't think they're listening. And even though we don't think that they, care about what we think. If you're honest with your kids, I'm concerned about you, I'm worried about you, or you're very open and honest about your views on alcohol and substance use, they hear it, whether they, act like they hear it or not. I mean, I have 5 kids. They, some of them just retreat to their bedrooms and close their doors. And you think, oh my gosh, that was a wasted moment. Like, I didn't get anything out of that discussion. But they hear you, and you are their most significant influence. And also, if you are the trusted adult, if they have a problem, hopefully they can come to you. If you're open about it and you're dialoguing about it, and you're, okay with saying, if they ask you a question, you don't know the answer, let's look it up together, or, yeah, let me think about that. Let me ask somebody who might know. You become the trusted resource for information, which you want them to get from you, not from, anywhere else. And you also want them to be able to come to you if they are struggling, or if they know someone who's struggling. I mean, we have a friend, her daughter came to us. She didn't go to her own parents. She came to us, and she said she had a friend who was really, really struggling with marijuana and alcohol, high school student. The boyfriend, a yeshiva boy, nice yeshiva boy, was dealing drugs and supplying her. And she was getting hooked. And this girl was very, very, first of all, she wanted to just, I don't know, have the boyfriend arrested if she could, but then she, decided that was not like a good thing to do, because she knows that family also. But she said she was very, very worried, and, because she knows what we do, but she also knows us. And so ultimately she did talk to her parents about it, but that's what you want. You want that open relationship where, if there is an issue with them, a friend, anybody in their lives, they can come to you and they can talk to you about it.
Right. And I think it's important for parents, like I said, to be empowered to have these conversations. They first have to be knowledgeable enough and not just frightened and this can't happen, I'm going to shut it down, and try to, be controlling, as opposed to having that, trusting, communicating relationship. I just want to plug 2 podcast episodes I did. I did one with Rabbi Ben Shushan and one with Rabbi Gluck of Amudim. And they're on our podcast and on our hotline. And that talks more about the relationship and the discussion. So I think those are both empowering talks from that perspective. And I promise you not more than an hour, so we're almost done. And I wanted to say one more thing. As a pediatrician, I get very frustrated because I have patients who have anxiety, depression, ADHD, or some combination of those disorders. And the parents are often very concerned that they not be on medication lest they be on drugs. And I just want to throw it out there. This is a constant struggle I have, that it doesn't mean that if you don't treat your kids' depression, anxiety, or ADHD with drugs, I don't want to be that simplistic, because not every, teen or child with that diagnosis needs medication. They could be in counseling, they may need other help, but they may be more likely, those are in a risk group for later addiction to substances, and even for ADHD, which is the one category that we use controlled substances. We use drugs in the amphetamine category. And it seems counterintuitive for parents. Why should I put my child on a controlled substance? They're more likely to be on drugs. If that happens, the opposite is true. It doesn't mean if you don't put them on it, they will become on drugs. It doesn't mean that everyone with this diagnosis has to be on it. But just as a pediatrician, I deal with this all the time. It's so frustrating.
So we actually do discuss this in our presentations with the kids. We talk about prescription medication. We talk about that they should be aware of, just like anything you put in your body, you should be aware that these could be potentially addictive substances.
Right.
We don't put in the same category because they are prescribed by a doctor. And as long as you're taking it under proper supervision by your doctor, with, by your parents, and taking it as prescribed, that's one category. But don't share it with anybody else. You have no idea what might happen to somebody else who takes a medication that's not intended for them. Don't overtake it. Don't take too many. And just kind of a general awareness about, especially opioids, although those are very limited now in terms of prescription, but still just being aware that potentially has that addictive quality. But we also say, many of you are on these medications or have been on these medications, and you need to be. If your doctor is telling you that you need to be on these medications, as long as you're taking them as prescribed and being safe and smart about it, this is something that's helping you. My daughter, because of her issues, she has ADHD, because of her abuse of Adderall, and that really led her very much at the beginning of college into harder substances. She does not take stimulants for her ADHD. She just won't. She takes alternatives. And even with opioids and painkillers, there are alternatives. Somebody could advocate for themselves and say, listen, I don't know if I really want to be on that. Mm-hmm. But if they need to be on it, they need to be on it.
Right. But the stimulant doesn't cause the addiction.
The stimulant doesn't cause the addiction, but the stimulant being abused.
Right. Abuse of it. It can be abused.
Right.
I'm just making a very important point because I have a lot of parents who are afraid to have their children treated for their ADHD with stimulants, lest they have a higher risk of substance abuse. And the studies do not show that. They show the opposite, that kids who are not treated appropriately, and it may or may not include a stimulant medication, are at higher risk of later substance abuse. And I'm just making this point so parents don't, listen to this talk and get even stronger against a stimulant medication for their child. If that is what the child needs, this podcast is only for education. It is not as medical advice, as we say at the beginning. But I just want to thank you so much for doing this with me and encourage people to check out the organization CCSA, Communities Confronting Substance Abuse. For more information, especially, I keep saying it over and over because it's so important for parents to be empowered, that section on conversations you can have at all ages.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And I hope, if anybody out there needs our help, whether it's to speak to Ilana or speak to ETL or speak to myself, we're here. We're here for anybody.
Thank you. And can our schools call you up to?
100%.
It's not just for Bergen County.
No. That's what I when I said earlier, I'm sorry if there was a misunderstanding.
Just checking.
We developed this program so we could go outside Bergen County.
Excellent.
But for COVID, we would have been in Chicago this year, but we're probably going to go next year. But we've been in several New York schools: Westchester, Five Towns, Brooklyn. So we are, 25 schools and growing. I mean, we have at least 10 more schools in addition to that who wanted to schedule us for next year. So we're looking to do programming in every school across the country, hopefully one day.
It is amazing. What you're doing is unbelievable. So brave and just, I can't say enough. It's unbelievable. Thank you for what you do. And thank you for sharing it with my listeners.
Thank you.
Thank you.